This is Iran, a country most of us know from news headlines. It's got a civilization so old, it makes most countries look like toddlers. Its coastline hugs two of the world's most strategic water bodies, the Caspian Sea up north and the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman down south. For all its history and grandeur, you'd expect sprawling coastal cities with lively ports and endless promenades. But this massive nation, with around 2,500 kilometers of coastline, doesn't do metropolises like Shanghai, Mumbai, or even something modest like Miami. So what's going on here? Why is Iran steering clear of all the coastal city spotlight? Iran is the birthplace of one of the world's most ancient civilizations, the Persian Empire. This is where legendary rulers like Cyrus the Great and Darius I led with vision and power, leaving stories that continue to inspire. It's the land that gave the world Rumi's timeless poetry, foundational contributions to modern medicine, and some of the most breathtaking art and architecture ever created. It's one of the few places where you can ski in the Elborz Mountains in the morning and explore scorching deserts by afternoon. And then there's the food. If you've ever tasted a perfectly crisp tahdig or fragrant gourmet sabzi, you'll understand why Iranian cuisine deserves its own UNESCO World Heritage designation. This rich culture and geography might suggest the potential for world-class coastal cities along its 2,500-kilometer coastline. However, that isn't the reality. Take the southern coastline along the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, a region brimming with strategic potential. It could host glittering cities, marinas, and seafood hotspots. Instead, it's home to smaller, functional ports like Bandar Abbas, which, despite being a key trade hub, isn't exactly a tourist magnet. And up north, the Caspian coast boasts lush greenery in towns like Rasht and Bandar Anzali, both significant regional centers with bustling local economies and growing populations. However, challenges like swampy terrains, mountainous backdrops, and logistical limitations make large-scale urban development less appealing. The coastline, while beautiful, still feels underutilized in a global sense. Now let's get geographical, because Iran's unique terrain holds some of the answers. First off, Iran isn't exactly flat and friendly like the Netherlands. Nope, it's a wild, rugged place. The Zagros Mountains dominate the western landscape, while the Elborz Range guards the north. These mountains don't just look pretty, they've shaped Iran's history, culture, and yes, its lack of coastal cities. Take the Caspian Sea coast, for instance. On the map, it looks promising, but in reality, it's hemmed in by the Elborz Mountains, leaving just a narrow strip of land for cities to squeeze into. Sure, there are towns like Rasht and Bandar Anzali, but they're far from being major urban centers. And why? Building anything significant here is no easy feat, with mountains looming in the background and swampy terrain underfoot. Add in the high humidity that makes summers unbearably sticky, and it's no wonder people prefer to settle further inland. Then there's the southern coastline along the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. Despite its strategic importance, the environment here is far from inviting. The heat is intense, the kind that keeps you indoors during the day. And let's not forget the small issue of limited fresh water. Desalination is a modern solution, but it's expensive and energy intensive. Cities like Bandar Abbas exist, but they're more functional than fabulous. Think industrial ports, not sandy beach resorts. The terrain here is another challenge. Much of the southern coastline is rocky and arid, making large-scale urban development an engineering nightmare, unlike the flat, sandy expanses that turn Dubai into a glittering metropolis. Iran's southern coast requires significantly more effort and money to transform into something similar. And when you add in the potential for earthquakes in this seismically active region, the risks multiply. Even the Gulf's strategic location, ideal for oil exports and maritime trade, has its downsides. It's a geopolitical hotspot, and that's putting it mildly. The Strait of Hormuz, a key choke point, has seen its share of tension and conflict over the years. Building major cities in such a high-stakes area adds another layer of complexity, making inland development seem like a safer bet. Let's rewind the clock to ancient Persia. Back then, the idea of coastal cities wasn't exactly on anyone's vision board. For centuries, the Persian Empire thrived by controlling trade routes that connected the east and west. The legendary Silk Road didn't just pass through Iran, it thrived there. Caravanserais dotted the landscape, offering rest stops for traders moving everything from silk and spices to precious metals. These hubs of commerce made inland cities the lifeblood of the empire, while the coasts remained peripheral, serving more as a gateway than power centers. Fast forward a few centuries to the age of European maritime dominance. As countries like Portugal, Britain, and the Netherlands turned their attention to the seas, Iran doubled down on its inland strength. Coastal vulnerability became a serious concern. Why build a megacity on the coast when it's an easy target for cannon-wielding colonial powers? Instead, Iran fortified its heartland, creating resilient cities far from the reach of naval invasions. Even the advent of modern shipping and global trade didn't shift the focus much. During the Qajar and Pahlavi eras, Iran invested in railroads and highways that connected inland regions rather than prioritizing ports. Bandar Abbas and other coastal towns served as crucial points for imports and exports, but they never grew into the sprawling metropolises seen in other parts of the world. The emphasis was always on maintaining control over the interior, which was seen as the true key to power. Today, you'd think things would have changed, but Iran's coastlines remain underutilized, largely due to economic factors. Coastal development is expensive. You need infrastructure, fresh water supplies, and let's not forget, an incentive for people to actually live there. That's not a small ask in a region where geography and climate aren't exactly rolling out the red carpet. Water is life, right? But Iran's coastlines, north and south, face serious water woes. Down south, water is scarce. Desalinization is pricey, and the power grid is already struggling. Up north, near the Caspian, there's water, but good luck building anything in those swampy, flood-prone zones. Then there's politics. Iran's economy is a roller coaster of sanctions, mismanagement, and limited foreign investment. Even oil wealth hasn't done much for coastal cities. Instead of vibrant hubs, they're left hanging. And don't get us started on environmental challenges, rising seas in the north, creeping deserts in the south, and the ever-present threat of earthquakes. One bright spot, Chabahar, a port on the Gulf of Oman, could be Iran's golden ticket. It's near major shipping routes, making it perfect for trade. However, bureaucratic red tape has kept it from reaching its potential. Historically, Persian culture has been more centered on inland life than maritime pursuits. Unlike the Greeks or British, who embraced the sea as a gateway for exploration, Persians favored mountains, rivers, and fertile valleys, viewing the sea with caution. Persian poetry gushes about gardens and seasons, but the sea? Barely a mention. Even today, when Iranians dream of escaping, they picture lush mountain villages, not sandy beaches. Coastal life just isn't their thing. This cultural bias, paired with political and environmental hurdles, keeps Iran's shores from shining as they could. Now let's play a little game of compare and contrast. Take a look at Iran's neighbors along the Persian Gulf. Countries that have turned their coastlines into symbols of modernity and excess. The United Arab Emirates, for example, transformed Dubai and Abu Dhabi from humble fishing villages into glittering metropolises that defy nature. Artificial islands, skyscrapers that scrape the sky, indoor ski slopes in the desert. The UAE went all in, throwing billions into infrastructure to make its coast a global icon. Saudi Arabia has also joined the race, launching jaw-dropping projects like Neom, a futuristic city promising to redefine urban living. Qatar, though tiny in size, has maximized its coastline's potential, using its oil and gas wealth to build cultural landmarks and host global events like the FIFA World Cup. Even Kuwait, with its relatively modest ambitions, has a thriving capital right by the sea. So why hasn't Iran joined this glittering coastal club? Well, the UAE's success partly stems from its flat, sandy terrain, which is essentially a blank canvas for architects and developers. In contrast, much of Iran's southern coast is rocky and arid, with stretches of inhospitable desert that make large-scale construction a logistical nightmare. Remember, southern Iran is earthquake-prone, adding an extra layer of risk to any ambitious building projects. It's not just about the land, it's also about the money. Developing a world-class coastline requires massive investment, something Iran has struggled to attract. Decades of economic sanctions have isolated the country from global financial systems, cutting off the foreign investment that fuels projects like Dubai's Burj Khalifa. While Iran's neighbors courted international investors and embraced globalization, Iran remained focused on internal resilience and survival, prioritizing inland development over coastal spectacle. And then there's the political factor. Many of Iran's neighbors have stable, oil-rich economies that allow them to take big risks on ambitious projects. Iran, on the other hand, has often been embroiled in regional tensions and economic struggles. Its focus has been on maintaining strategic control over its ports for trade and security rather than turning them into luxury destinations. So what does the future hold? Could Iran ever have a coastal city that rivals Dubai or Shanghai? Well, never say never. The country's strategic location and natural resources give it plenty of potential. One promising area is Chabahar Port City, which is already being developed as a major trade hub, thanks to its proximity to international shipping routes. With the right investment, Chabahar could become a shining example of what's possible along Iran's coast. If political and economic conditions improve, and if the challenges of geography and climate can be addressed, there's no reason they couldn't develop its coastline further. Who knows? Maybe one day, Iran's coastline will burst onto the global stage. But until then, it'll remain one of the country's many mysteries, waiting to be unraveled. Do you think Iran should focus more on its coastlines? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this fascinating, imagine a place where crossing a valley could take you to a village with an entirely different language. A world where over 800 languages thrive side by side. That's the story of Papua New Guinea. Click here to watch it now, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about how geography shapes our world. See you in the next video.